My name is Jennifer Carter, and I'm 32 years old. I live in Seattle now, and most days I live a quiet, focused life, coding, mentoring, and working on a foundation I built with my own hands. From the outside, I might look like someone who has it all figured out, but this piece? It wasn't given to me. I had to earn it the hard way. I'm a twin. My brother's name is Davis. We were born just 3 minutes apart in a small clinic in Walnut, Washington. I came first, but I didn't cry. The umbilical cord had wrapped around my neck, cutting off oxygen to my brain. I survived, barely. That one moment, those few seconds of silence, shaped the rest of my life. Davis was born strong, loud, healthy. The whole room cheered for him. Meanwhile, I was rushed into intensive care, my tiny body unable to move the way it should have. Doctors called it cerebral palsy. My legs never developed strength. I've used a wheelchair since I was 2. But the real challenge wasn't just physical. It was how the world, especially my family, treated me because of it. We grew up on the edge of an apple orchard. My father, Bob, was a hard-working man, calloused hands, a permanent frown, and no time for softness. For him, Davis was everything he ever wanted in a child. And me? I was the shadow in the corner of the room. I used to wonder if he even saw me at all. This story isn't just about disability. It's about being invisible in your own home. It's about what happens when love is conditional and silence becomes your only survival. But one day, I stopped being quiet. One day, I said, enough. My earliest memories aren't of laughter or family dinners. They're of watching my brother run across the orchard while I sat near the window, my small hands gripping the armrests of my first wheelchair, wondering what it felt like to be chosen, to be seen. When I was 8, I gathered the courage to ask my father if I could help out in the field someday. I remember his exact words. He didn't even look at me, just muttered while sharpening his pruning shears, "The orchard's not for people like you." As if my life had already been filed under useless. Davis, on the other hand, could do no wrong. He was agile, strong, and loud in all the right ways. My father showed him how to climb trees, use tools, pack crates. They worked side by side, dirt under their nails and laughter in their voices. I used to pretend I didn't mind being left inside. But I did. For my 10th birthday, my mom, Camilla, secretly saved up to buy me a basic electric wheelchair. I still remember the thrill of sitting in it for the first time, imagining the paths I could now take on my own. But a week later, Dad gave it to Davis, just to test it out around the yard. He scratched the wheel covers and snapped the adjustment lever. When I cried, Dad looked at me and said flatly, "You ain't got legs. What does it matter what chair you sit in?" That line stayed with me for years. At school, I was the quiet kid with awkward limbs and a teacher's helper always nearby. I stopped raising my hand after a boy mocked the way I spoke during a presentation. At family gatherings, I was wedged between the entryway and the table, out of sight from the camera flashes always centered on Davis. Even when I scored the highest on a math test in 5th grade and Mom proudly taped it to the fridge, Dad replaced it the next day with a photo of Davis picking apples. "That's the one doing real work," he said. And in that house, real work was the only thing that counted. It wasn't just the big things that hurt. It was the small moments that chipped away at me, day by day. The way Davis would get an extra slice of pie without asking. The way Dad would walk past me without a glance. The way I'd be wheeled to the corner during birthdays while Davis blew out candles under chandeliers. But through it all, there was one person who made me feel like I mattered, Mom. Camilla was the only warmth in that cold orchard house. She made me softer apple pies because my teeth were weak. She taught me how to use the joystick on my wheelchair, gently guiding my hand until I got it right. She never spoke loudly, but her presence spoke volumes. I remember one October afternoon more vividly than any other. The wind had picked up, and golden leaves covered the backyard. I wanted to reach the small garden where Mom and I used to sit. As I wheeled myself forward, one of the wheels got stuck in the soft earth. I tried rocking it free, but it tipped. I fell forward, face first into the wet grass. I couldn't sit up. My back throbbed. My left arm trembled from muscle tightness. I yelled for help. over and over. No one came. Until my father passed by. He looked at me, expressionless, and said, "Why do you keep trying to do things you can't do? Isn't it enough you make life harder for everyone?" Then, reluctantly, he grabbed my arm to pull me up so tightly I gasped from the pain. But the worst part wasn't him. It was Davis, standing just a few feet away. He saw me lying there. He heard every word. And he turned and walked away. That night, I didn't cry. I clenched my teeth and swallowed it, like always. But a few minutes later, Mom came rushing out, kneeling beside me in the hallway. She didn't say anything to Dad. She didn't scold Davis. She just held me gently, firmly. Then she whispered, brushing the hair from my forehead, "If it hurts, cry. You don't have to be strong. I'm here." So I cried. And for once, it felt safe to do so. If I had a home in that house, it was wherever Mom stood. Not the walls, not the orchard. Just her arms, her lap, her soft voice. She never made me feel like I had to earn love. I simply had it. But love, as I learned too early, doesn't always last forever. I turned 18 on a cold February morning. Snow clung to the bare apple trees outside. The house was unusually quiet. No laughter. No movement. Mom had woken up early to bake muffins for me, like she did every year. She was humming softly in the kitchen when it happened, a stroke. She collapsed before she could even call out for help. By the time Dad found her, the tray of muffins was still warm. She was already gone. They said it was sudden, peaceful, that she didn't suffer. But we did. And for me, the silence she left behind was unbearable. Her funeral was simple. No one asked if I wanted to say anything. No one rolled my chair forward to the front row. I sat alone in the back, staring at the casket, knowing it held everything that had ever made me feel like I belonged. After she died, the house changed overnight. Dad barely spoke. Davis barely looked at me. The fireplace never lit again. The kitchen felt hollow, without the smell of apples and cinnamon. Mom's room was locked the day after the funeral, never opened again. But 3 days before her death, she'd left something for me. A small tin box on top of the bookshelf, wrapped in tissue paper, tied with green twine. Inside, a pale gray scarf, hand-knitted, and a note in her rounded handwriting. "No matter what anyone else thinks, you still deserve to be here." I read that note 100 times in the weeks after she passed. Each time, it felt like she was beside me again, her hand on my shoulder. 6 weeks later, I left that house. I told Dad I was moving out. He didn't ask where. I think he was relieved. He just nodded once. I took only 3 things with me: the electric wheelchair Mom gave me, 1 small suitcase, and the scarf in the tin box. And that was enough. I didn't have a plan, just a will to survive and my mother's words echoing in my chest. I left the orchard house behind, wheeled down a sidewalk still crusted with snow, and caught the bus heading out of Wenatchee. I thought I'd figure it out as I went. But I didn't make it far. 2 towns over, my wheelchair battery died near a gas station. I sat there under a flickering streetlight, cold and unsure what to do next, when a familiar voice called out, "Jennifer?" It was Uncle John, my mom's cousin. I hadn't seen him in years. A gentle man with weathered hands and kind eyes. His wife, Aunt Hannah, was with him. They were driving home from a late dinner when they saw me sitting alone in the dark, wrapped in my scarf. Their faces fell. They didn't ask questions. They didn't make me explain. They just loaded my chair into their SUV and took me home. That night, I was given a warm meal, a soft bed, and something I hadn't felt in a long time: safety. John and Hannah lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside Spokane. Their home was wide and welcoming, filled with photos, soft music, and the smell of vanilla candles. And they had a son, Leo Allen. He was my age, tall, quiet, and studying software development at the local university. He greeted me with a simple nod and didn't treat me like I was fragile. Just there. Like anyone else. The next morning, over breakfast, Uncle John said, "You're welcome here as long as you need. No rush. No pressure." Aunt Hannah smiled and added, "But if you want to stay long-term, We can help you get enrolled in classes. You're smart, Jennifer. You just need the right place to grow. I said yes before I could overthink it. And just like that, a new chapter began. I enrolled in an online tech boot camp for students with disabilities. I started learning the language of code, the first language that didn't judge how I moved or sounded. I had no idea where it would lead, but I knew I was finally moving forward. My fingers trembled the first time I typed hello, world. Not from fear, but from possibility. Code didn't care how fast I moved. It didn't laugh at how I spoke or hesitate when I rolled into a room. It just responded, true or false, success or error, without judgment. I studied day and night, determined to turn this chance into a future. Leo started sitting beside me during study sessions. He had a calm energy, always ready to answer a question, but never making me feel like I owed him for it. We grew close, not in loud ways, but in steady, quiet rhythms. He never called me inspiring. He just called me Jennifer. A year into my studies, I built my first working project, a simple communication app for kids with nonverbal autism. The idea came from a boy in our neighborhood who loved drawing but struggled to speak. I watched his eyes light up when he tapped a picture of an apple and the app said, "Apple," out loud. That moment broke something open inside me. I wasn't just learning to code. I was learning to create meaning for someone else. Leo watched me grow with a kind of pride he never voiced aloud, but I saw it. In the way he made extra coffee during late nights. In the way he stayed up debugging with me, even when he didn't have to. 3 years later, we launched our first startup together. It was a small platform focused on tech-based therapy tools for children with developmental challenges. We pitched to dozens of investors. Most said no. One said yes. By our 3rd year, our software was in over 30 treatment centers nationwide. We had helped hundreds of kids communicate and made enough revenue to cover our costs and keep going. Still, I never forgot where I came from. Every fall, I'd send a small check to my father. Just enough to cover the basics of the harvest season. Not out of guilt. Not out of hope. Just to remind him I existed. Davis never reached out, and I never asked why. But I did wonder sometimes if they saw the news segment when our platform was featured on TV with my name beneath it and the revenue numbers scrolling across the screen. Turns out they did. And that's when everything changed. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when my phone rang. A number I hadn't seen flash across my screen in years. Dad. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. But then it rang again. And again. I answered on the 3rd ring, placed the phone on speaker, and braced myself. His voice was low, dry, measured, like he was reading off a grocery list. Davis is getting married, he said. Her family's helping them buy a house. We're short. Need a little extra to close the deal. He paused. It's $200,000. I didn't respond right away. My hands froze over my keyboard. You're doing well, Jennifer, he added. Saw that video someone sent. All those centers using your thing. I figured helping your brother once isn't too much to ask. A small fire flickered behind my ribs, not quite anger. Something colder. Do you even know what I do? I asked softly. Yeah, he replied. Apps. Kids. Therapy. All that. He spoke like it meant nothing. I ended the call without arguing. And later that night, against every instinct in my body, I made the transfer. $200,000. With one note, wishing you both happiness. 3 days later, I received an envelope in the mail. The wedding invitation. Formal. Embossed. My name printed neatly. For a second, I allowed myself to hope. I booked a wheelchair-accessible hotel nearby, picked out a quiet but elegant gift, a bottle of aged wine, and carefully wrapped the scarf my mother had knitted into my suitcase. I thought maybe, just maybe, this time I'd be allowed in the photo. But just 2 days before the wedding, my phone rang again. Dad's voice was low, careful, rehearsed. It's probably best you don't come. I didn't answer. I waited. He continued, some people might feel uncomfortable. You know how these things go. Uncomfortable? I'd been the invisible thread in that family quilt all my life. Good enough to sew things together. Never good enough to show. That night, I placed the invitation in the trash. I didn't cry. But for the first time in a long while, I felt truly foolish. I told myself I was done. I wouldn't go. I wouldn't watch from the sidelines again. I wouldn't roll into another place where I wasn't welcome. But then, on the morning of the wedding, something unexpected happened. Uncle John called. "I know what they did," he said, voice calm but firm. "But you deserve to decide for yourself. Hannah and I are heading to the church. If you want to come, we've already set up a space for your chair. Leo will be with us. We'll be there in 20. I hesitated, staring at the packed suitcase, still sitting by the door. Then I said, "Okay." At 10:50 a.m., a gray SUV pulled up outside St. Thomas Church. I wore a black suit, no tie, and my mother's scarf folded gently around my shoulders. Leo helped me out of the car and wheeled me toward the side entrance. No one saw me come in. The pews were full. Sunlight poured through stained glass windows, casting soft red and gold shadows on the bride's dress as she walked down the aisle, her hand in Davis's. He looked calm. Perfect. I stayed in the back, silent, unseen. But then the officiant spoke. "Before we begin the sacred vows, if any family member would like to share a few words." Aunt Hannah gently touched my shoulder. "Now's your moment if you want it." I rolled forward. The wheels of my chair echoed against the church floor. All heads turned. I took the microphone from the priest with steady hands. "Davis and I are twins, born minutes apart. We share DNA. But from day one, our lives split down two very different roads." The room buzzed with whispers. I turned toward my father in the front row. His jaw was set like stone. I was the child in the wheelchair. He was the one in the photos. I sent money. I sent silence. I sent hope, thinking maybe one day I'd be allowed to belong. My voice softened. "But if this family looks better without me in the picture, then keep the one I'm not in. Just don't mistake a beautiful photo for a whole story." Then I looked at Davis. "You didn't forget me. You chose to ignore me." And I left the mic. I turned my chair toward the side door. My back straight, eyes forward. No one clapped. No one called out my name. No one stood to stop me. Except one Leo. He was already moving toward me as I wheeled through the aisle, his eyes locked on mine, not with pity, but with pride. Aunt Hannah and Uncle John followed close behind. But just as I neared the door, I heard my father's voice behind me. Sharp. Loud. Burning with rage. "You had no right to ruin this day." I turned slowly, keeping my voice calm. "I gave you everything you ever asked for. A house. A check." My silence. "And now you embarrass us?" he shouted, storming down the aisle. In his rage, he reached for the microphone stand, tall, metallic, and heavy. Before anyone could stop him, he swung it forward. The cold metal struck the side of my head. Gasps. Then silence. The sound of the impact echoed through the church like a bell. My vision blurred. Blood trickled down the side of my face. I heard Leo yell, "Call 911." Within seconds, he was by my side, wrapping his jacket around my shoulders. I saw Davis standing frozen, watching the chaos. Not moving, not speaking. Then he did the unthinkable. "She asked for it," he muttered. And just like that, his bride stepped away from him. "What did you say?" she asked, horror in her voice. "She shouldn't have shown up," he said, shrugging. Her expression hardened. She ripped the veil from her head and turned to her parents. "We're leaving." The wedding was over. Meanwhile, the police arrived within minutes. Leo gave a full statement. So did several guests. My father, Bob, was arrested on the spot for assault with a deadly object. As officers escorted him away, another officer turned to Davis, who was still trying to justify everything to the bride's family. "You encouraged the attack?" the officer asked. Davis didn't deny it. He was arrested too, right there in the church where they had planned to start a new life. Two men who once ignored me were finally seen for what they were. And I, bleeding but unbroken, rolled into the ambulance, with Leo beside me. The hospital lights were harsh, but I barely noticed. Leo sat next to me the entire night, holding my hand as doctors cleaned the gash on my head and ran their scans. I had a mild concussion and a few stitches, but the damage was nothing compared to what had already been done to my heart over the years. This time, I wasn't going to stay silent. The next morning, still in a hospital gown, I gave a full police report. Leo helped me draft my official statement. Aunt Hannah and Uncle John stood behind me like a wall of unwavering support. A week later, with the help of a lawyer Leo found through a disability rights group, I filed charges: second-degree assault for my father, criminal complicity, and defamation for my brother. Court hearings began 6 weeks later. The evidence was overwhelming: guest testimonies, security footage. Even the wedding photographer's microphone had picked up parts of the confrontation. The judge listened silently as the prosecutor played the video. My father swinging the stand, Davis excusing it, the bride calling off the wedding. When it was time for sentencing, the courtroom was silent. "Bob," the judge said, "you showed no remorse in your actions. Assaulting your disabled daughter with a weapon in front of witnesses is unforgivable. You are sentenced to 5 years in state prison, with no possibility of early parole." Davis tried to look indifferent as a sentence was read. 2 years for criminal complicity, plus mandatory counseling for anger management and empathy training. Neither looked at me as they were led away in cuffs.
But I didn't need them to.
Because I wasn't there for their regret. I was there for my closure. After the trial, life didn't just go back to normal. It became something better. My foundation, the Jennifer Project, expanded. We funded 3 more communication apps, partnered with schools, and offered scholarships to disabled students. And through it all, Leo was beside me.
Kind.
Loyal. Patient. One spring morning, under the loquat tree where we had first tested my app with that little boy, he proposed. And I said yes. We had a small wedding. No orchards. No chandeliers. No speeches from people who didn't really know us. Just soft music, real smiles, and the people who had stood by me when I had nothing. Uncle John walked me down the aisle. Aunt Hannah wept quietly in the front row, holding Leo's baby picture in her hand like a quiet blessing. And Leo, my Leo, looked at me like I was the only person in the world who mattered. And for the first time, I believed it. We moved into a 1-story house in West Seattle, fully accessible, filled with warm lights and bookshelves. The tin box with my mother's scarf sat on our mantel, beside a framed photo of her holding me as a baby. Every morning, I touched it, a silent promise to carry her strength forward. The foundation thrived. We hired a full team. I spoke at conferences. I mentored young girls in wheelchairs who once thought they'd never be seen. And 9 months after our wedding, on a rainy autumn morning, I gave birth to our daughter. We named her Sophia, because that's what she was: wisdom. As I held her against my chest in the hospital room, I felt the world quiet. The years of being ignored. The cold rooms. The wounds that never fully faded. They didn't vanish, but they softened. Sophia had Leo's eyes.
She had my hands.
And she would grow up never having to wonder if she belonged. Sometimes I still think about my father and Davis, both still serving their sentences. I wonder if they regret anything. If they ever speak my name. But I don't wait for their apologies anymore. Because I've learned something that took me decades to understand. Family isn't made from blood or shared DNA. It's made from presence. From protection. From love that doesn't come with conditions. And now, when I look at my daughter, I don't feel fear. I feel peace. Because she'll never have to earn her place in this world. She'll grow up in a house where softness is strength, and silence is never mistaken for love. And as for me, I'm finally home. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt left out, unheard, or unseen, know that you are not alone. We all deserve a place where we are valued, respected, and loved. Not for what we can give, but simply for who we are. If you believe in building that kind of world, you already belong.